Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Breaking Barriers Now. Today, my amazing guest is Kristi Sullivan. She is doing so much with just self care, but she also does what is called human design. And this is something that is going to be super interesting to not only myself, but I'm sure anyone out there listening or watching this YouTube video, because this isn't something that we normally hear about. It's like we're conditioned in society to fit in and please everybody, and and here we are later on in life, and I know for myself, I learned you can't please everybody, and we're not meant to fit in, we're meant to stand out and that's okay. So I'm really interested to hear what you have to say about that. And then you're also a yoga instructor, so I'm looking forward to hearing your story and being able to share this with other people. And I just want to thank you for coming on today and just being willing to share everything that you have.
Thank you, Jody. I'm so glad to be here and that you're hosting this type of platform to just help inspire others. So thank you.
Yes, this was definitely something that I felt was a necessity, and I think the more of us that do this is going to really change some things. So, we got to come together and collaborate and make it happen,
Definitely.
right?
Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit, what's your background, where are you from, how you grew up, and what kind of propelled you to go into this field?
Good question. I'll try to cover it quickly. I actually live in the Northeast and born and bred here. But important to note, I'm actually a first generation American and have an Eastern European family and roots back there, which
Okay.
plays into my story. But I had a long time career in marketing, communications, followed the typical formula of work hard, study, graduate, go to school, work hard at a job. And when I was in this marketing career, I also came across yoga about 20 so years ago and was like, this is amazing. The mind body connection, the ability that yoga had to help shift wellness and well being.
Mhm.
And I really was very interested in learning about it and teaching it. So I eventually became a yoga teacher. And that started my journey, I would say, with not only wellness and holistic modalities, but eventually energy and also personal growth and my own personal development journey. Over the time, I explored different things, always
Mhm.
met the right people at the right time,
Yes, that's
and
important.
and then we all know what happened in 2020 for most of us. That was a
Yes.
big year for me because it was a job change.
Mm,
But 3 years before that, in the 3 years before that, I had several personal crises that really shook things up for me in my life. One was in my family. My father had been dealing with Alzheimer's and he
mm,
eventually passed in that time. But that was sort of a hard period for me as one of his caregivers.
yeah.
Then I had a crisis in my marriage that really also kind of shook things up. And we overcame that, but that was happening at the same time. And then I mentioned the job change came kind of unexpectedly, but I knew that I was meant to probably be doing something different
Yeah.
and took it as an opportunity to start to make some shifts in my career. I had been in marketing and decided to sort of retire from that and step more fully into personal development and wellness. And then COVID also hit for all of us.
Yes.
So that 2020 was a big year for me. And I say through those 3 years, including the pandemic, I luckily had met people and also started to find different practices that were really important for my self care.
Mhm.
And I would do things not only like we think of self care often as sort of the external eating well,
Right.
getting exercise, maybe meditating, but I also was doing what I call spiritual self care, which is the inner work,
Yes.
doing things like EFT tapping, ancestral clearing, family constellation work, things that were helping me to recognize this work hard mentality, or some of the things that I believed and programming I had that I didn't even know where it came from.
Right.
And so I started to look into why do I believe this, and what do I need to learn from it. And at the same time, about 5 or 6 years ago, I discovered human design. And human design became sort of a tool in my toolbox at that time to help me understand myself at a deeper level. In
Right.
2020, I stepped more fully into teaching it. So that's why I'm here today, to talk about the human design and the self-care piece together.
Yeah. Well, I love what you're talking about there. I mean, I have a little bit of different of direction that I went with it, but I had to really dig deep internally as well. And one of the things, because I'm a fitness coach, a health coach, and stuff like that, and one of the things that I tell people is I was like, I was in the best shape of my life, and I was internally falling apart,
Mhm.
and I didn't even notice it, and until a few years later, and then everything just kind of all came crashing down. And I'm grateful that happened before COVID, because oh my God, like I don't know what would have happened if it had, waited until 2020. But I think that we all, have these journeys that we have to go through, and no one way is right for everyone. And so that's why I always love having different perspectives, because your perspective might resonate with other people, whereas mine may not. So now other people are going to have options and know that hey, there's other ways of doing this, but the main thing is we have to get it done, right? So let's talk a
Definitely.
little bit about that, because this is an interesting concept, especially for someone who loves human sciences. For me, to learn about this human design thing that you have.
Yeah, and something that you said that ties very much to this is human design is your unique energetic blueprint,
Hmm.
and we are not alike. Um, in most ways, we're very unique, and embracing that uniqueness is what helps, I think, also to connect us in a way, because we then get a chance to honor who we truly authentically are, and recognize that others uh, can be, and give them a space to be authentic. Human design is a tool, similar to, I call it astrology on steroids, because it is based on your birth date, but it brings together some ancient modalities like astrology, the chakra system, I Ching, and Kabbalah, which are ancient principles and philosophies and systems. And they were brought together in the 80s by a gentleman, the founder of human design, who has since passed,
Yeah.
but they're rooted, in very ancient wisdom. And so what happens is you run what's called a body graph or chart based on your birth date. You can find a lot of information online. I always tell people that, and you can find your chart, but then you look at it and it's very complex. It looks a little bit like hieroglyphics. You're like, what does this mean?
It's like getting DNA
So
results, right? Like what?
yeah, and I usually say human design finds you when you're ready for it, because it again becomes a tool in your toolbox, complementing maybe things that you've been doing on your inner work journey. The
Mm,
difference is, like a personality assessment will take into account how you were brought up, your programming, your beliefs, again, ways that you are maybe conditioned.
mhm.
And you can change that with work. You can sometimes have a personality assessment shift, but you don't have that happen with human design. It is actually always your chart based on your birth date, unless you had your time wrong and needed to change the time on your chart. But
Right.
let's say that you knew that, your chart will stay the same, and it's what's at the core underneath that programming and personality and experiences in life. So it's your unique operating system, so to speak. It's a very mechanical way of looking at your energy, and when you understand it, it helps you to lean into how to make choices and decisions in the energy that you were built with. And then it's like you're not fitting a square peg into a round hole. You're really starting to embrace that you do things in a unique way, a unique fashion, and others can too, but they don't have to look the same process.
Wow. That is really interesting. I'm interested to know, because, and for anybody that's out there listening, we talked about all this beforehand before we got on here, so she's already got all my information. But one of the things that she asked me is what time of day that I was born, and I really didn't know. So I'm interested to know, like, how does that change the outcome
That's a
when you're not sure about the time?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let me use this example. The date and time is very specific to the alignment of different planets and cosmic energy. So we know, for example, exactly when the full moon is at like its fullest.
Right.
We know what time is the solar eclipse, or when the
Okay.
sun is the summer solstice happens. Like there's
Right.
almost like a specific time. And think about ages ago, that's how they
Mm.
navigated like across
Yes.
the sea and such,
Yeah.
right? So that what it's called a transit, or that movement in whether it's the sun, the earth, the moon, the planets, there's a specific timing. So if you told me, well, I think my birthday is 8 a.m., but
Mhm.
it's really 8 p.m., there might be some shifts that create different aspects in your chart that would be different from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. But for our conversation today, we're going to keep it general.
Yeah.
So if you don't know your birthday out there, it would be helpful if you do find it through either the hospital or town city records. But if you don't know it, you can also, there's other ways to kind of figure it out. But for this, we're going to keep it general.
This is going to be interesting. All right. So, how do you normally start with people? Like, how, besides getting all the information, what does it look like?
Yeah.
And I'm sure we're going to go through this, you guys. So, anybody out there listening, you're going to get kind of the generalization of what she does when she helps people in this area, because she's going to be doing this with me. So,
Yeah. So
interesting.
again, you can find your chart online easily in various places, and there's a lot of information, but to study it, it takes some time. So what
Mhm.
I like to do is sit with people in a reading, I call it, or a session,
Mhm.
where I go over the chart and what it shows, or the different aspects. And we usually start at the first layer. Human design is a rabbit hole. Once you go down it, it can go very deep. It could be a long time to learn everything and experiment. But again, we start at that first layer. The first layer is to help you understand your energetic type. And there are 5 types, sort of like the astrology sign that you are. But again, the type that you are may not be look like the same as another person in this category. So I say that
Mm.
because it's just like a starting point. So
That's
you're what's called a generator. And generators are 70% of the population. I am one as well.
mhm.
This category includes generators and manifesting generators, a subset. Generators are here to do the valuable, productive work to kind of help society function. And when we're doing the right kind of work, it feels really good. It's
Yes.
just in our energy. We're kind of built for this type of activity. And the reason is because we have something called the sacral energy center.
Mm.
If you know the chakras, the sacral center is sort of responsible for workforce and life force. So generators technically have this, what I would say, like a built-in large battery that keeps us going through the day
Mm.
if we're feeling healthy, and if we've gotten good sleep, and if we're doing the right kind of work, then we feel like we could just keep going. And it doesn't mean work behind a computer, but anything throughout the day that we're responding to or following up on or following through.
Mhm.
And so does that sound like you?
Yes, it does. Very much so. So far,
and
so
I'll and I'll
good.
say on that note that there are other types. We're all taught sort of to work hard,
Yes, we
but
are.
there are other types in the human design system where they don't have this sustainable sacral energy. So for them, working, for example, in a 9 to 5 job just doesn't feel great. It feels
Mhm.
draining. They may burn out. They may feel like they're overworking, and they actually need breaks throughout the day, downtime, sometimes more alone time. Generators tend to be happy kind of doing what we're doing and making sure kind of we're moving along through the day. And we have this large battery that helps us
Yeah.
get through the day.
Huh.
And at nighttime, it's really important we do get good sleep so that we can
Yeah.
recharge for the next
Yes.
day.
That's interesting though, because I mean, when you said what you just said about, the other portion of the population, I found that for me, I'm kind of a little bit more balanced these days where I realized that when I was like go, 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 just trying to work all the time, it started kind of taking me down a little bit. And so now I do make sure that I call them brain breaks and do those things and, take a break during the day or whatever that looks like. So that's kind of
Yeah.
interesting. And I can't see myself working a 9 to 5 job anymore either. So,
Well, and there may be other aspects in your design that kind of help show like you may be more built for doing things like the entrepreneurial type of
mhm,
endeavors and consulting. The other thing I'll say is that we are really in a society of overworking. So even as a
sure.
generator, if we're finding ourselves overloaded, too busy, not feeling like we're in the right line of work, it just feels heavy. We feel
Yeah.
overwhelmed and frustrated. Another layer to this is that there's a type called the manifester. And the manifester's role is to initiate, create, and innovate. And the generator's role is to follow through, to respond, sort of those ideas and creations. And what happens is when generators start to operate like the manifester and they try to make things happen, initiate, just go do it,
Been there
they
before.
then start to overwork because
Yes.
we're built better to respond. Does
Mm,
that make sense? How does
that's
that feel
interesting.
for you?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and just I can give an example that, there's been times in this 2 years that I've been creating this business where I may have initiated something like, let's say I have a program and a new offer, and I'm just not getting the traction. And then you can look at the advice of, marketers, and I used to be
Mhm.
one to say, no, you have to follow this formula, just do this, be out there in social media and work harder, market
Yes,
more.
exactly.
and and what happens is, in as an example again, when I respond, when I, for example, had this somebody come to me and say, hey, could you teach a class on human design? I think my group would really like it. I said, sure, that sounds great, I would love to do that. It didn't feel like work, it was very
Right,
easy, I responded to it, and from that I started to get clients, for example.
right.
So the energy, the way that came about was a very different energy than me trying to initiate it.
That's cool that you said that because that's one of the things that I say, like I'm really a lot better off when I'm able to have kind of interactions with people, whether it's a Zoom call or whatever. But my usually my marketing and the way that I also get clients is more, or the right clients, I want to say, because we can all get clients, but you have to get the right clients, right? And so I've found that, just initiating conversation, talking to people, teaching a workshop, right? Like that's always worked for me a lot better than just the normal social media thing too. So that's interesting that you said that as well.
Yeah. And when we look at different aspects of your unique design, it may show that you prefer, the teaching piece or working with small groups versus large groups.
Hmm.
And these are all really just guiding principles. I
Right.
spoke with someone recently about, their soul journey, their soul path. And you may have, that kind of assignment in life, but it's up to you how you choose to express it and what decisions
Mhm.
you make or what ways that you go about following
Right.
that journey. So with the design, it's sort of like I call it, your soul is on a road, a path in
Hmm.
life, and the human design chart is your car that you're driving on that path. So you're still headed in a direction, but it's up to you to make sure you're putting the right gas in that
Right.
car. If it's diesel,
Yes. Oh, you sound
making
like me
sure,
when I teach a nutrition workshop.
yeah, right. And then this is where self-care comes into play because it's really important how you manage the energy, the
Mhm.
blueprint that you are. So, for example, if you're a non-sacral being or non-generator, then getting enough downtime and really making that part of your daily routine. And like you said, even generators need some downtime. So
Yeah.
self-care is one of the fastest ways or easiest or most natural ways for us to get in alignment with our energy. And
Hmm.
I'm talking about the self-care, like we talked about earlier, maybe the inner work of clearing out some clutter in the
Yes.
mind or in the programming, as well as the self-care that helps you feel nourished. It could be certain foods, it could be certain type of activity or exercise. I'm not here to say like all generators should be runners because we've got this
Right.
battery. No, like I prefer walking. I like doing it in nature, like, or
Hmm.
hiking
Yes.
rather than like running. So you have to find what that self-care is best for you.
Right.
Because when I do that walk in nature, I feel so aligned. And then I come
Mhm.
back and I have opportunities to respond to. It's magically
Yes.
like happens.
Yes, that's really good. I want to kind of backtrack just a little bit before we go too far into what we're going to go into, because one of the biggest things that I always like, I enjoy listening and having the listeners here is, the this backstory, right? So you kind of mentioned some of your backstory, but if you don't mind, if you would go just a little bit more detail, just to kind of show people, like, we all have these stories and it's okay. And whatever we go through, we can come out on the other side if we just give it a chance. So if you're okay with that, if you would
Yeah.
share a little bit of your backstory, I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah. Let's see how I want to tell the story. I think I grew up too in a way that many of us think, which is like stay positive, have, a positive mindset. I used to be told
Mhm.
I had rose colored glasses, which I still am proud of this day, of seeing
Yeah.
things in a positive perspective.
Yeah.
But it didn't mean that hard things wouldn't happen or I wouldn't go through them. So
Exactly.
for example, when I knew I couldn't control my father's health with his Alzheimer's, I would just focus on how do I want to show up and how can I feel better,
Mhm.
even though it was challenging and
Yes.
it was going to be hard, but how could
Yes.
I feel a little bit better? So for me, like I give this example sometimes, I would write a letter just how great my father was doing and
Mm.
how, he had to go through, unfortunately, like hip surgery. And I was like,
Yeah.
he's going to come out of this and he's happy. And so, happy to be and strong and walking again. And so things like that I did for myself, but energetically, I think it had, a ripple effect in a way. But I
Yeah.
know going through hard things is what helps us to get more resilient, maybe
Yes.
work on that courage and strength,
Amen. Yes.
and and not to stay positive, but it's not easy, but those are the lessons that we can learn so that not only do we get through it, but we can help others who are going to go through that same journey or a similar journey after we do.
That is so
So
good. That
so
is so
that's
good.
really, yeah, that's really what I learned, I think. And to be real and authentic, that when it wasn't easy or when it was hard, that I admitted that I let
Mhm.
people know around me, not because I needed them to fix it, but just so
Right.
that I was being real and honest, and then they could be honest with me about how they were feeling. And I think that was a key part to me, my self growth and becoming more authentic.
Yeah. So you mentioned, so in 2020, you ended up, you said you kind of lost, did you lose your job or did it get shut down due to COVID, or how did that work?
It was actually not due to COVID, but there were some job positions that were being eliminated through the company.
Ah,
And it was a small company. So it was unexpected and not usual. It was not really like something we went through. So it was unexpected, but at the same time, I knew that my path was meant to go in a different direction
yeah.
eventually.
Yeah, that's good. And I've had to deal with that as well. So it's definitely, I think sometimes we just have to be open to possibilities, right? It's like, okay, maybe this wasn't the lane that I was supposed to be in, and there's something better waiting for me. I just got to keep going and try to find it, right?
Yes. And at the same time, I going through that, I was able to acknowledge that it still sucked. It was still hard.
Yes.
I still had these feelings that I think typically happen when you're in a situation like that. It might bring up things like abandonment or not feeling good enough or not feeling included, loved, or just why me? And that
Yes.
did still happen to me, even though
Yeah.
I had this more positive outlook of like, this is going to get me to a better place. But I still went through those emotions. And I think that was me, again, learning to be authentic
Mhm.
and acknowledge the parts of me that didn't feel good.
Yeah.
And then that led to me, I think, feeling more like a whole person. And
Yes.
when we suppress parts of us, um, in human design, same thing. If you're suppressing the self that you are, or you're acting from the not self place, they call it,
Mhm.
then you're not expressing that authentic design or potential that you have.
That is so true. And I can definitely testify to that from personal experience. Well, thank
Yeah.
you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. Okay, so we're going to go back. We're going to fast forward again. All right, so I'm a generator. Awesome.
I am
But
too,
I
by the
know there's a
way.
whole lot more. Yes, and you're a
Yeah.
generator, so we're both generators. And then I know there's going to be a whole lot more to this. So let's go ahead and I'm going to let you just dive into it now and tell me about myself.
Great. I'll say a few other things. One of the areas that we talk about in a reading is also called authority or decision making. So I
Mm.
say this first. The head is not the best place to be making
Nope.
decisions. We're
No, it's not.
we're programmed that way though. We are taught
Yes.
think, be intellectual, be smart, analyze, weigh the pros and cons. And we can do that, but if we just allow the head just to hold information
Yes.
and know that the true source of what we need and what we desire and what's good for us is in our body wisdom,
Mhm.
that can change many different decisions that you make. For each of us, though, we also have a unique place in the body, again, based on our human design, of that guide to help us with making decisions. And for you, Jody, it is the emotional solar plexus or the
Oh.
emotional center.
Uh-oh.
So, what this means, and about 50% of the population have what's called a natural emotional wave. That means you have highs and lows that you go through in some pattern. What I would recommend is tracking your journaling to like
I do
be in
that.
tune with that.
Yes.
Now, when you're in an emotional low, I want to first state that it may feel like melancholy or depression. That is an actual important part of the design for how you can be creative or a time to be creative. But you're going to have what's called this emotional wave. So
Yeah.
let's imagine you're in that low and you're faced with making a decision.
Hmm.
So for you, you want to be careful not to make decisions in the moment, but you want to ride out the wave. You know that when you're in a low, eventually it comes up and comes down. And
Yes.
so over about a 24-hour period, if you give yourself that time and space, you will reach what's called emotional clarity. And it'll be like this knowing of like, yep, this is what I should do, or nope, this is not for me.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It definitely does, and I've had to learn that the hard way. So that's why I'm over here. For anybody that's watching the video, you can see my expressions. I'm just like, yeah, yeah, like, because I'm one of those people where I used to just react, and reactions never got me anywhere. And so I've had to learn to kind of just, and it's not 100%. It takes a lot of effort for me to do this, but I've had to learn to kind of just pull back. And when I do have to make a big decision, don't just react on it. Kind of, just what you said. It's taking that time and maybe doing something else, or going for a walk, or writing. Like, that's my thing. I write a lot of blogs. I just write. I've been writing since I was a kid. And so just having that clarity and not necessarily taking it out on the person that I might be talking to at that time, because that has happened. And luckily people give me grace because I apologize later. Like, please forgive me for the person I was, 10 minutes ago. That was not the person that you should meet. So that's interesting that you said that about taking that time, because that is, I think a lot of us need to really consider that. And I hope anybody out there is really taking notes. I'm going to go back and watch this and probably take some notes too, because this is super important and we all need the reminder, because, we're like firecrackers sometimes. We can just, any
Yep.
little thing can set us off. And like you said, it can depend on how we grew up, and any kind of things that we've endured in our lives, and those abandonment issues, and everything just kind of can come back up, and we have to really be careful and just allow ourselves to be for a little while. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah, and great point. Often, we're conditioned, especially in this day and age, to, we have to be again positive in feeling really good.
Mhm.
But for some, there's this again a pattern of highs and lows, and when we try to change that, then we're again trying to be inauthentic. We're not trying, but we are inauthentic,
Yes.
and in a way, trying to suppress who we
Mhm.
really are. The other thing I'll say is that, again, not everybody has this emotional wave, and some other designs are really more to be making decisions more spontaneously or from an
Mhm.
intuitive voice. And again, it depends on your design because there's a couple of other ways. But for, again, the emotional wave or defined emotional authority, um, giving yourself that permission to not make a decision right away is huge. And one of the ways I would advise or give you some tips is, if you are asked to make a decision, to ask for them for, like, can I get back to you tomorrow, or I
Yes.
think it's a yes, let me confirm with you later. And it
Yes.
may not have to be a 24-hour period. And what you said, something about writing, it's still about embodying in the body how you feel and making the decision from there and not from the head, because our tendency is we maybe feel the body or feel the signals, but then we bring it up to the head and start thinking about it and lamenting over it, and then there's chaos, and then we've disconnected from that emotional center.
Yeah, that is so true.
Yeah. Another thing I could tell you about you specifically, and is that you have two other centers in your body, the head and your root, which are called open centers. Open centers are where we tend to take on energy from around us, or in the head case, we tend to take in ideas from the outside. In
Yeah.
the root center, we take in um, this pressure to have to do things. And with the open head and the open root, you're called a pressure cooker.
Did you read my blog? Because I haven't posted it yet. I literally have a blog in draft that talks about the pressure cooker and how we have to release the valve. That is so interesting.
Yeah,
And
someone
you
will
guys, it
usually
took me
say to
43
me,
years to figure out that I was a pressure cooker.
usually
Kristi
someone
figured it out
says,
in 30 minutes. I don't know.
someone usually says, is there a camera you have? And I'm like, no, no, this is just me telling you what's in your design. And the interesting thing is, you want to embrace that. Like, that is who you are, and just the awareness of it to then make different choices to say, okay, wait a second. I'm putting that pressure on myself. What if I take a
Yes.
step back? It
Yes.
doesn't mean you have to change who you are or beat yourself up. It means embrace, this is your design,
It's like
and
you've
then
known
move
me
from
my
there.
whole life. What is going on here now? You guys, look. If you need to reach out to her, because I'm already just kind of like, wow, she knows so much in just this little bit amount of time. So, wow.
Yeah, it's an amazing tool. I think it finds people when they're ready,
Yes.
because it really helps you understand yourself at a deeper level. It helps you understand who you're not, and it's just really life changing. It's transformational, and I have a book with 25 other human design
Yeah,
practitioners
I wanted to
who
make sure
each
we
went
talked about that. Yeah.
And each of us went through this kind of transformation of like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing to hear this information. Each of us, and there's many, people practicing human design or just
Mhm.
excited about it. So, find the communities out there to talk about human design. It's really amazing.
Yeah, and Kristi's book, you guys, make sure you go look it up. It's called Stop Overworking and Start Overflowing. So if you're on the YouTube video right now, make
Yes.
sure you saw the cover. Make sure you go check that out. Because I can only imagine, especially with 25 different viewpoints, how interesting that could be.
Yeah, and just a little story for the journey I was on in 2020. Somebody asked me to be part of their a book writing program, and I was like, I'm not going to write a book. Like that's like way too much work. And I said yes, though, because my body wisdom said
Mhm.
that might be fun just to try it out. You never know where it's going to
Right.
lead. And then a few months later, a friend of mine who is in a collaborative book, she wrote one chapter among several authors, was launched the book, and the publisher was then looking for writers for the second volume. And I decided to try it. I said, you know what, I can write one chapter.
Yeah,
And then a year later, I decided to put out this book where I'm the lead author, and I recruited 25 others to share their stories. So it's
that's
on
awesome.
Amazon. I hope you read it. It's not technical about human design, but more inspirational. And
Yeah,
then there's tips and tools for helping you align your energy and do self care.
I love that. I love that. Wow. So, and I want to just kind of point out what you said about, it being the right time, because that's one of the things that I always tell people too. Like, not everybody's ready to start their health journey, right? Like, it's all about timing, and we have to be kind of in a different place. If you had told me these things maybe a couple years ago when I wasn't in the greatest place, but of course I wouldn't have had this podcast either. But but if you had told me these things, I may not have been ready. There was a lot of things that people were telling me back then, and I just wasn't ready to hear it. And now I'm finally in this place where I am open to these conversations, and I am open to learning more and being okay with who I am and all my flaws and all my, whatever, and talking about all of it, and just having some really authentic conversations now. And I'm really enjoying it, to be quite honest.
Yeah. And I want to say too, in terms of timing, I mean, we're really going through a shift, not just individually, but we see it across the world in these
Yes.
last few years. We know this this last 2 years, we have all been in it in some way, some
Mhm.
form, in our own journey and our own experience, but still something that has been across the globe rather than just in one community or in one country.
Right.
And so this is part of, I think, this bigger evolutionary shift. So we're all light workers. We all, even if we're not yet sure what that light is,
Yes.
our journeys are so important to helping others who, again, are not yet going through that journey, but may someday, or
Yeah.
for us to bring to light what we learned in our journeys to inspire others and just to help the evolution, I think, of the planet in a bigger sense.
That's yeah. And yeah, especially this time, there's so many people I talk to all the time where, some people are really struggling right now. They're really struggling, and I've struggled, and you've struggled, and we've all struggled. And I think that sometimes, if we can just come together and shed the light, like you said, shedding that light and just letting people know, like, hey, there is light at the end of the tunnel. You got to go through it
Yeah.
though, and it's going to look different for everybody, like you said.
And tying it back to human design, there's even something called the energy of struggle that some
Mm,
people have very present, because that struggle is what helps the experience and the embodiment, so that when you get to the other side, again, you have this stronger sense, because that experience and experimentation has to happen in your design, or
mhm.
it's how that human design specifically expresses.
Mm, that's good. So what else can you tell me about myself today, Kristi?
Well, and this is really interesting, maybe a good note to end on. So there's something in the design called the profile, which is sort of the character that keeps showing up for you through your life journey. And it's called the opportunist slash role model. And the profile numbers, if you speak human design language, is called 4-6. And I am also a 4-6 generator. So then when you meet other people, you're like, oh my gosh, you're a 4-6, I am too.
That's awesome.
So it's sort of like this like language. But what I'll say about it is you're meant to be probably connecting on a podcast and bringing people together, because your 4 line, or the opportunist, is about having a foundation of a network,
Yes.
friendships, or social network, or in this case, the podcast network that you've built.
Mm-hmm.
And you also have the role model, which is, again, in my profile as well. And this is a journey, a life journey of becoming a role model, because you've experimented, you've done the inner work and observed, and you actually hit the role model at about age 50. And it's related to something
yet.
called, yeah, but it's something called,
but I'm on
Chiron,
the way.
and I'm almost there, but it's called the Chiron return. But the point for this role model and the line 6 that you are is that your journey is meant to be right now, like learning what you're learning and seeing what you're seeing and taking it in, so that in this later stage in life, you really are here. And I think sometimes it happens earlier for some of us, like you're already starting to embody that role model through a podcast, through your coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's, again, a key in your design.
It is interesting, because I have said this year, because I am kind of behind the scenes on a lot of things. I'm actually, writing for other people and doing some things behind the scenes. And I said, I was like, I kind of like that too, because now I get to learn more. And, when you learn from other people who have been doing things longer than you, then you get to, find out even more who you are, and not necessarily do what they're doing if that doesn't work for you, but just learn and be ready. Right. So this is kind of the preparation phase.
Mm-hmm.
So you just kind of, gave me a little bit of more confirmation on that. And I also love what you said about like the connector part. I've had a lot of people that say that, because I'm always connecting people. And it's just something, I talk to people, I meet people, and then if I can connect them with someone else, then I do that. And I'm actually around more people now who we love to do that. We just love to be able to connect other people and collaborate, and it's been amazing. So you've literally just given me some great confirmation today, and I know if you can do this for me, that you can do this for other people out there. So you guys, I hate that we have to end this, because I'm sure that there's a whole lot more that we could go into.
And I'm happy to, we always can set up a reading, and that's what I love doing is teaching people some of this basic information, and then one-on-one doing a session or two to go over their chart and help them go down this rabbit hole.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So how can people connect with you to learn more about this, and maybe if they want to take a step further and learn more about themselves?
I have a website. That's my name, Kristi H. Sullivan. And you can find a link to the book, which is on Amazon. I have a digital course, which is about an hour long. It just gives you this basic overview of the human design types and about self-care. Mm-hmm. And I also can be reached through the website for my contact information if you're interested in a one-on-one reading. I also have a Facebook group that I am most active in. A little bit I'm on Instagram under Kristi H. Sullivan, and on Facebook it's Kristi's Human Design and Self-Care Community.
Awesome. Awesome. So you guys make sure that you link up with her. This has been an enlightening podcast for sure. Sometimes I have no idea what's going to happen in these podcasts, and I just say a little prayer and say, all right, let's go. And this has been really awesome. So again, I just really appreciate you for coming on here, and sharing, what you do and why you got there. We all have these backstories, what ignites our passions. and why we do what we do. And I think it's important that we share those backstories, because I think sometimes people don't realize, there's a mission behind what we do, right? It's not just to help people look a certain way or feel a certain way, but there's actually a whole lot. It can go a whole lot deeper, right? So
Definitely.
I've
Yeah.
definitely learned a lot today. Again, I appreciate your time. You guys, make sure you reach out to her, look into this. If you're out there, if you're struggling, just reach out to someone. Like she said, there's a lot of people doing a lot of great things out there. So just make sure you talk to someone. Don't try to do it yourself, because I've definitely tried to do that. It does not work out very well. And it's okay to ask for help.
Yes.
So thanks
Yeah.
again, Kristi. Do you have any
Thank you,
parting
Jody.
words, anything that you would like to say to anybody out there listening?
Just I love to always share as last words to inspire people. Just do self-care. Do that self-care, even if it's only a few minutes at a time. It doesn't have to be a luxury
Yes.
appointment or expensive. Treat self-care as essential and not as a reward or luxury.
Yeah, that's really good. And you guys just start. And I have said this on a previous podcast where I said, for me, meditating was very difficult for me to just sit still and and not do anything. And so I literally just had to start setting a timer for 1 minute. I started there. It was just 1 minute. So just start. Anything is possible. You have to be willing to take that first step. So thanks again, Kristi. You guys, this
Thank
has
you.
been another episode of Breaking Barriers Now. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you go watch the YouTube, go subscribe, share it. The podcast is on all podcasting channels now, so I'm really grateful for everything that's coming about with that. So make sure that you're sharing this with anyone out there that you know and love. So thanks again, Kristi. Everyone, God
Thanks.
bless. Have a great day.